Good.
That's it. All right, you guys, what's going on? It's Blaze here at the Blue Chip Athletic Club podcast. I'm stoked to welcome Brian onto the show. We're going to get into his stuff, but really quick, we'll rattle off a couple of podcast sponsors. First Form, our buddies where we get all of our supplements, Sweet Perfections protein cookies, Pilot Base, Dash Track, which is going to help you guys build, all the entrepreneurs out there, build yourself your own website with funnels and AI bots and blogging tools, SEO optimization. That whole thing is kind of rolling out super soon. So we're really excited to have those guys coming out. And then this is actually the first episode I think I've done since I broke both of my feet. So I was supposed to be doing a military fitness test for all military branches to kind of see if I'm as fit as a Navy SEAL and a paratrooper or whatever kind of community it is. But unfortunately, we'll have to curb that. So we'll be doing kind of a different program now or promo now for the next probably 6 to 8 weeks of if you guys message us and let us know an ailment or something that you're working around, we'll build you a 3-week program. Just find us on any of our social media or anything like that, and we'll make it customized for you. But without further ado, Brian, talk to me, brother. I'm super excited to have you on. I heard you on Jeremy. He's actually a business coach and friend of mine at this point too. The podcast that you had was super interesting. So I have a little bit of background, but tell the people like who you are, what you do, and then you can go origin story as far back as you want. And then we can kind of go from there.
Yeah. Once upon a time I was born. No. So like nobody's like, I don't want that. No, it's, my world is health, but not from the perspective that most like doctors and practitioners come from. They come from looking directly at the body first and trying to figure things out. You then have layers of health practitioners. You kind of have your main general, just kind of medical doctors. Then you have this subset of movement in the medical side, which is moved more towards functional medicine. The big difference between the two, generally, very broadly speaking, is that your traditional kind of medical doctors are more concerned with kind of like what the problem you have and just trying to like make the problem not as uncomfortable for you. That's where you get more into just like, prescriptions and pharmaceuticals and things to kind of stop the symptom, right? Functional medicine, their point of view is let's fix your body to the point where you don't need those, those medications anymore, right? And so they're trying to like get to the root cause of what's happening that's causing a symptom. If you fix the root of that problem, then the downstream of what's creating the symptoms would go away, right? And then you're fixed, right? So their functional is more about trying to actually fix somebody, and kind of general medicine is more about kind of like comfort, if you will, right? And just trying to like reduce symptoms. And so my side of the fence is when you get into functional medicine, what a lot of them have started learning over the last 10, 15, 20 years is that the environment that you live in has a direct impact on your body and how optimally your body is working, right? And so a very, very big piece of the foundation of how a body is functioning is the environment that it's exposed to and basically what it's effectively breathing 20,000 times every single day. And if you're breathing in, and there's a lot of stuff, right? So we're going to really focus on mold because that's my world specifically, but there's so many things that we're exposed to now that we didn't used to be exposed to. And as a result, our bodies are overburdened a lot, frankly. And so what it does is it starts creating like long-term chronic conditions that really impact the body in many different ways, which makes it really, really difficult to give like a single diagnosis because once it gets into our bodies, think of it like wherever the weak link is in your body, that's the area that's going to kind of show it first, right? And so you start seeing symptoms from people where it's neurological symptoms, it's gut symptoms, it's skin, it's fertility, it's hormones, it's your hair's falling out, it's my kids stopped behaving, my kids started wetting the bed at 11 years old for no reason and I don't know why. There's there's so many different symptoms and manifestations of an exposure like this, it becomes really, really hard to diagnose. And so what really happened is, to give you a bit of like my backstory. So this is a family endeavor on my end. So I'm a second generation in this, and actually married into this family. And so my father-in-law and his brother about 20
Good for
years
you, man.
ago, I know. My wife is pretty much responsible for everything great in my life. So,
Yeah. Dude,
uh,
I'm telling you, you better tell her like, hey, listen to this because I give you a sweet shout out in there. So
I tell her, I'm like, hey, I did a pod today and I talked about you in it. And I think at this point, she's just like numb to it at this point. Uh,
the first time it was probably cool though.
yeah. So, her dad, my father-in-law, and then his brother, um, started local kind of mold inspection businesses even before they really understood the health side of it, like 20 years ago. And they started noticing this pattern in clients they had, that people were sick and like their doctors couldn't figure out why they were sick, right? And so they were just trying to kind of figure out, is there something going on? And so what was really great about those two, they're twin brothers actually, so we call them the twins. It's hilarious. So these twins, they start going to these medical conferences, that are environmental health focused medical conferences. And 15, 20 years ago, these are very small conferences. Like functional medicine is very small at the time. It's not as big as it is now. And so they're in a room with like 100 doctors maybe, and it's these two. And then so everybody's talking to each other and like, oh, how do you do what you do? Or how, what's your area of focus or whatever? And they're like, oh, we're not actually doctors. And people are like, well, what are you doing here? And
Yeah.
then they explained what they're seeing, right? We're seeing clients, we're seeing this in the houses, we're seeing this constant thing, and we're seeing patterns in them, and this, that, or the other. And the doctors are all like, oh my God, we need you guys. And that was kind of the big light bulb for them, that there's this whole other area that was very underserved. It's not you're like, hey, I had a leak under my sink, can you come like that's not what it is. It's like, it's a medical point of view and a medical led process and how to evaluate a home to understand what exposures look like and how to reduce those exposures so somebody actually can get better again, right? So somebody can heal. And they effectively built out their, this kind of foundation for this. And about 8 years ago, myself and my cousin, who is the son of the other twin brother, started We Inspect, which is our national inspection company that we have now. So we basically took the local brands and turned them national. And it's been 8 years. And 4 years ago, which is what a lot of what we were talking about on Jeremy's show too. We were talking about the inspection process. We're also talking about kind of this at-home screening test effectively that allows people to understand if there's even a problem worth investigating. And we created this test called the dust test about 4 years ago. Dust, like literally dust in your house. And what it is, it's super simple, but it allows somebody to collect a dust sample in their house from like a Swiffer cloth, basically. It goes to the lab and it gets analyzed. And it'll show you the different species of molds in the house, the loads, which ones are high, which ones are not. And we can even compare to body symptoms and toxins in the body and really show somebody, like, is your house driving like a toxic mold load in your body? And it's crazy because looking at this data, a lot of times when people are going down this road and they're having like constant fatigue all the time, or like they have something called that they describe as brain fog, where they're like, hey, I don't really remember things as clearly, and I'm a little slower than I used to be, and that sort of thing, which is actually how I got into the business. I had an issue like this, and that's how I even got into the business myself. Is my father-in-law came in and looked at my place and was like, so this is why you're feeling like this, and helped me get out of it and helped me understand it. And
Did you even know at the time? Like, were you even aware of like, hey, this is like what could be causing the health issues that you're experiencing?
No, again, this is my wife, right? She's like, you sound like my dad's clients. You need to have him come look at this place, right? And like, what happens? I had a leak, and the landlord came and like, quote, fixed the leak, right? Which didn't really solve any problems other than drying out a couple feet in my ceiling. But there ended up being mold like in all my walls around in my bedroom as a result of that leak. And the landlords are like, oh, everything's fine. You're fine. There's nothing wrong with you, right? And so again, my future wife at the time basically was like, hey, you need to have my dad come out here and figure this out for you. And lo and behold, I had a massive problem. And I saw that and I was just like, I need to be doing this. Like, I feel like there are people in the world where you deal with a health issue. And in this realm, a lot of the doctors, and there's not many people on my side of the fence that do what we do, but there's way more like functional medicine doctors that do it. You generally have your own experience with it to get you over here. It's not something that you like grow up doing or go to school to do, right? It's one of those things where you experience it and you're like, I gotta I got to help people with this, right? Like, this is crazy. And I feel like there's two types of people. One type of person is like, I'm going to figure all this out on my own. I'm going to get better. And a lot of people do that and they go on and live happy lives, and that's awesome for them. That's great. And then there are people that were more like me who did all of that and then was like, I feel like compelled to do this all the time for other people, right? And so that was kind of the path that I took, and that's how I got into it. But yeah, my symptoms were brain fog was the first thing. So I can't already tell you, well, I talk very fast, and I always have, and I was much slower. Like, not only was I thinking slower, I was speaking slower. So it was actually audible to other people as opposed to just like my brain wasn't moving as fast, but I literally wasn't speaking as fast. That was not enough to get me completely freaked out, apparently. And then I wake up one day and I go to wash my face and I have like eczema and like psoriasis stuff on my face. And that was the thing that I was like, whoa, what's going on? You know, who cares about my brain, but God forbid take my face and like,
That's
then
right.
now I'm going to do something. So,
that's funny.
that was kind of the path. But I mean, you know, now it's really amazing because so many people are impacted by this and don't know it. So many people are impacted and don't know it. And when they finally do get to the point where they figure it out, which we could talk about that if you want on how people get there. But like, once they figure it out, and you're able to address it, it's like miraculous turnarounds in people's health. Like, there's people who are like really chronically bad. There's other people who are like low grade chronically bad, right? So you have like tiers of it, but
For sure.
the turnarounds are consistent, and people get their lives back. Kids get their lives back. It's pretty crazy. It's a pretty crazy thing.
So break it down. I know I told you briefly before we popped on, but you know, our audience is, I'll say broadly, like pilots, active duty military members, like former athletes. I'll say most people are probably in and around my age, mid 30s, early 30s, and they're like, hey, like, they know nothing about mold. Like, break it down for us. Like, what is it? Why is it something that could be potentially problematic for somebody? And make it so simple that a Coast Guard pilot can understand.
Yeah, I'll make it so simple. Then we could talk about how we've like done work to help the military specifically in their housing, because
Sure, yeah, hit me.
it's a huge deal. The short of it, our bodies are inherently meant to detox everything that we're exposed to, right? We have detoxification systems. We have, you know, we're kind of built that way. The problem is, as we've evolved in the world and there's more and more things that we're exposed to, a lot of times our bodies can't keep up with the amount of toxins and external things that we're exposed to, right? So mold is a huge piece of it, but, you know, you also have, you know, heavy metals, and you have pesticides, and you have, you know, fill in the blank with all the things, right?
Right.
And so what happens is that, and if you start looking, you'll just see like this continuous increase in chronic health conditions over the last however many years, right? And it's because our bodies are just constantly burdened so much that they're kind of failing. All of our bodies are failing at a different rate because we just can't keep up with it. And so what mold is the biggest external influence on our body that has the biggest impact on our body. So let me say that another way. So of the things that we are exposed to, right? And so you have food, you have environment, you have all these things that our bodies are exposed to. Mold is the one that has the biggest kind of broad spectrum impact on a person's body. And the way that it works is two different ways. One is every mold at its very minimal is an allergen. So when you breathe it in, you get effectively an immune response and a histamine response that happens, right? And so at the very bare minimum, even if there's no toxins in your house or anything like that, but if you're just looking at that, you're automatically going to start getting all the upper respiratory stuff. You're going to start getting like chronic infections that don't seem to go away, right? So it's like, I hear this a lot with kids when we're working with people with kids, and they'll be like, yeah, I mean, my kid's like always sick, but you know, they're kids. They're like 3 or whatever, and they're at school. They're like, oh, that's just what they are.
Dude, I hear it all the time. Yeah.
There's something about like always sick and actually like figuratively always sick and literally always sick. And those are two very different things. Like figuratively is like, man, it feels like every month somebody's got something, but you like recover for a while and then they get something else and then they come back. As opposed to my kid's kind of sick all the time. Like we've got nose this and sinus that and lung, all, you know, asthma this, but like none of it ever goes away. That's very different, right? And so you kind of have that on the low end. And then what happens to many people, for a couple of reasons, it's the toxins that are created from the mold that drive like really, really significant health issues. And so a lot of people have heard the phrase toxic mold before, right? And so the reason that's a phrase is because many, many molds have the ability to produce, it's called a mycotoxin. And it's literally a toxin that is meant to kill living things. That's what the toxin is meant to do. So for the mold specifically, it's a weapon the mold has to protect its territory from other mold or bacteria or anything else coming in and basically getting to its food source. So it's defense mechanism. And it creates this toxic chemical that kills anything that comes in its area. That's the purpose of it. And it protects, it's like a fortress, it protects its thing. Well, we are also living things. We're not that small, so it doesn't kill us like that. But what it does is it destroys our barrier systems in our body. So every cell has a protective barrier around it. So we may have heard of like the gut barrier, the brain barrier. Every cell has its own barrier, right? So we basically, every cell in our body has almost this like protective fortress built around it. Every system in our body has like a protective thing built around it, because not everything is supposed to connect to everything, right?
Yeah.
But what happens is that mycotoxins are barrier destroyers. And what they do is they go in and they tear the barriers apart. And then they're open. And when they're open, now toxins and stuff flood through your entire body and they impact you at a cellular level. They get into your brain, they get into your gut, they get into your cells in different places. And this is why the symptoms that come from it are so widespread across like all the body systems. Because what you're doing is effectively putting a key into all of our protective shields that we have inside of our body, and you're turning the shields off. And now all the toxins, not even the mold toxins, but then all the other toxins in your body too, can get straight into the cells, straight into the gut, to the brain, to all these places. And now you have the start of long-term, very significant chronic disease that occurs as a result of it. So like for me, brain fog was effectively the precursor of what would have turned into Alzheimer's if I didn't get it fixed, right? So these symptoms that we feel are kind of like the warning signs of the longer term, like bigger problems that occur. And we have time, we can get to them, right? But we have to make sure we're getting to them. And if not, and you're constantly flooding, like for me, if I was constantly flooding toxins to my brain, at some point the brain is going to lose, right? And then you end up with what goes on there. So like for me particular, there's a mycotoxin, it's called gliotoxin, and it's a direct key to your brain barrier. It just opens it. And so it's not even that it's the only one that gets in there, but it opens it like I described, and all the other ones get in there too. Then your brain starts kind of creating the amyloid plaque and stuff and a defense mechanism. The next thing you know, you end up with Alzheimer's. And there's forms of Alzheimer's. This one in particular is very well researched. There's a doctor, his name is Dr. Dale Bredesen, and he's actually created and coined, and I don't know if coined is the right word, but he found a third type of Alzheimer's. A lot of us have heard of type 1, type 2. There's a type 3 Alzheimer's, which is called inhalational Alzheimer's. And it's actually not Alzheimer's at all. It's breathing toxins and it affecting your brain as if you have Alzheimer's. And he's proven that you can actually reverse that type of Alzheimer's, because it's not, quote, really Alzheimer's. It's a toxic buildup in the brain. And so he has well documented effectively reversing this type of Alzheimer's for many, many people. And so that happens in all areas of our body. And so the mold piece is so problematic, because not only can there be toxins in the house that we're breathing that end up doing this, but mold can also colonize in our body. And so if it colonizes and grows in our body, you're now creating those toxins inside. And so now you have like this bad actor inside that is spewing out toxins from in your body and doing everything that I just described. And it becomes incredibly, incredibly problematic. So like, yes, pesticides and like these other things are important, but they're not getting into your body, creating a home base and then having a war with everything else that's happening in there, right? And that's what mold effectively does in our bodies. And it's very, 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 very problematic. And the other thing about why it's so important is because we look, and I mentioned it earlier, we breathe 20,000 times every day. And so the sheer volume of exposure we get to these molds that are in our environment, in our homes, we all spend 80, 90% of our time indoors And these days, especially post-COVID, a lot more of our time is spent in our house than anywhere else because a lot of us work from home, at least part-time or whatever it is. And so we're exposed to this much longer, and 20,000 breaths every day is much different than I eat 5 times a day and I'm not eating healthy, right?
Right.
Or my water isn't the best. It's just volume and consistency over and over and over again. And that exposure builds up. And that's why it's so important. And that's why there's been such a huge movement in the medical field, really understanding that mold is kind of like the biggest thing that we need to figure out. Otherwise, their treatment protocols don't work. Symptom sets continue because you can't out detox a 20,000 time a day, retox, if you will, right? If you're breathing
Right.
it. So that's, I don't know if that, I kind of ranted on, but that's kind of why it's so important, and a range of sort of the symptoms and the mechanisms and things that we see.
No, that's great, man. I really appreciate the breakdown of, you're essentially at war all the time with something that you're going to be exposed to 20 plus thousand times in a day, and kids even more so, right? I mean, kids breathe way more than adults do just because they're getting hyped up on Mountain Dew and running around all over the place, and then have to then figure out like, hey, we're having, maybe mom and dad is having this symptom, maybe the kids are having this other symptom, chronic sickness, all those types of things that are kind of breaking down within the body. You're at war with it all the time. And then, oh, by the way, once it's ingested, it's then, starting to colonize. I mean, I feel like that's pretty intuitive. People can kind of understand how that goes. So what is like, you were at this point where you were hit with a similar thing early on. What would you say, like 8 or I don't know, you said you started the business, I guess, 8 years ago with your cousin, but like prior to that point, like you're having this happen to you when your wife met, or you met her, and now you're trying to figure out like, hey, what's going on with me? He comes in, father-in-law comes in and saves the day and is like, hey dude, this is something that's affecting you. I think you need to get this looked at. Like, what happens next? Like, I'm sure people listening are just like, yeah, dude, like I'm kind of having some of these things happen. You can't just call up like some random person and be like, hey, can you check my entire house for like water leaks, or like, do they call a plumber? Like, I feel like practicality,
Yeah.
when that comes from, like someone's like, oh yeah, dude, I don't even know where I would start.
Yeah. Well, let me kind of set the stage on sort of like what it looks like in a house. And then there's a very easy way to like know if there's something going on. But like in a home, one of the biggest myths in our industry, this is what happened in my place and what I see all the time, is that this thing of like, if you don't have water, you can't have mold. And so many people are like, well, I don't have any leaks. I don't have this. I don't have that. There can't be mold in my house. Mold needs water. Or there was a leak, but the leak is dry. So now the mold must be dead and I can't have mold. And the majority of what we find in homes is the result of previous water intrusions or small leaks. And when we say leaks, it's not like big floods. It's like my garbage disposal dripped. Like it's things like that cause these problems. My kids are in the tub and they splash when they're in the tub and the water hits the wall on the outside of the shower, outside of the tub. Our houses don't know where that water came from. It just knows that it's water, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of times we will like normalize and rationalize stuff if we know where it came from, because we have this feeling that like, oh, well, it's not like a leak. It's not a flood. So it can't be a thing. And, as far as our house is concerned, they don't really care where it came from. If it's drywall and water is soaking into it, mold can grow on the back of it, right? And so the thing that we see more often than anything, like literally like 80% of the things we find in a home are not wet right now. And so this is why most mold inspections don't work for people, is because their inspector will come in and they're just looking for something that's wet. Like that's all that they're doing. They're like, oh, nothing's wet. This is what happened in my apartment. This is literally what happened to me. They came in like, hey, we dried it out. Everything's fine. And then I started complaining of, I think I have a mold problem, because my wife kind of like flagged it for me. I didn't want to call my father-in-law right away because I hadn't met him yet, really. Like I'd barely met him. I didn't want this.
You didn't want him loading the gun, dude. You didn't want to be
I know.
no, target number one.
So I tried to like circumvent it because I didn't know like what was different about an inspection versus like the way that we go through a house. I just like most people don't know, right? So I go to the landlord. I'm like, hey, I think this is a thing. So he calls, whatever inspector he uses for his buildings or whatever, and he comes in. Think about a lot of these inspectors, they don't actually look for anything. They're not really inspecting anything. They're like coming in and just taking air samples in the middle of rooms. And air samples in the middle of rooms, we did an internal study on this. It's a 78% false negative rate on an air sample in the middle of a room. Meaning, if I have a mold problem in a wall and I test behind the wall where the mold problem actually is, right? Common sense, go as close to the thing that you're trying to find and test it there, right? And find out if it's there, right? Well, if I take, 4 steps away and I put an air pump in the middle of a room, about like quote breathing height, and I take a sample there, it was 78% false negative there when 2-3 feet away there was mold in a wall. And there's a lot of limitations to air testing in open spaces like that. And it's just the wrong test for the intention of that test, right? Like the intention of that test is there a mold problem here? It wouldn't tell you where it's coming from because you're doing it in the middle of a room. So like the intention of that test can't be where is my mold? The intention of that test is just like, do I have a mold problem, right? The problem is the further you get away from source, the more diluted the air becomes in a room. So the further away you get, the less and less concentration there's going to be. And then by the time it gets to an air sample, it's not really going to show anything. Unfortunately, that's not how our body works. So it's not a direct representation of how we breathe. And that becomes a challenge because you're using a test that isn't really representing what's coming into our mouths and our noses. And then you're making very big decisions off of that data that's ultimately flawed. And that's what happened in my room, right? So they called some guy and they came in for like 30 minutes and said that there was no problem. Lo and behold, I still have stuff showing up on my face and my brain's not working, right? And then you get somebody who tells you like, oh, there's nothing wrong. It must be you. Yeah. One day I just woke up I was in my late 20s. I just woke up in my late 20s one day and my brain stopped working. Like no.
Dog.
Yeah. Like this is not what happens.
Yeah.
And so what he found in my place was my leak was a pipe in the ceiling. It's a pretty big water leak. So imagine everybody listening, like if you had a pitcher of water and you poured it on your kitchen island, let's say, the water is not going to go down. There's nowhere for it to go. It's going to go sideways, right? Until it gets to the end of the island. And then when it hits the end of the island, there's no more horizontal surface on your island. It's then going to ride the side of the island down. It's going to curve and it's going to ride that wall all the way down. So in my ceiling, it did the same thing. It went horizontal to my walls. And when it got to my walls, it rode down my walls. And so it was all behind my walls. But they dried the 2-foot area up top that was wet. And then they told me that there was no problem, right? And so this is the challenge. This is the challenge. So the question, or getting back to what you said, the big thing that I always want to try to make sure that I instill in people is that it does not have to be wet right now for the mold to be there. Like if you watered a flower or a plant and that plant grew, and then you stopped watering the flower or the plant doesn't just like disappear. It gets dry. It kind of folds over. It gets like brittle, like pieces will break apart. It gets hard. My grass in the backyard is kind of quote dying right now. It's like the water, it has less water. And I stepped on one yesterday and I felt like it punctured my foot. It like stabbed me so hard, right?
Yeah.
That's how hard it got and it broke, right? Because that's what they do when they get hard like that. Right. So colonies do the same thing. Mold colonies do the same thing. When the water goes away, they dry out like that. They break like that. So what happens is that all these little tiny particles will get pulled into the house just from natural airflow patterns in the house, and they get into our breathing zone, and that's how they get to us. And if you're only looking for something that's wet right now, you're going to miss almost all of it, right? And that's what most of the inspectors out there do. And instead, what we do is we will look for, because there can be wet stuff, right? So we'll look for that. But the majority of what we're looking for is really just visual cues or history and that we learn in conversations while we're kind of like onboarding and getting ready for the process that lets us believe that there might be a problem somewhere based on either a historical water event that occurred there, or if we're looking and we're seeing signs, like visual signs of water intrusion, but might not be wet. So an example would be like a little bubbling in a baseboard at the bottom of a baseboard. Baseboards don't bubble out for no reason. They bubble out because moisture gets soaked into them and then they create little bubbles, right? Or like in a sink cabinet, if it's like warped a little bit. The wood wasn't warped when they put it in there. The wood warped because it soaks up a little moisture, it warps. Now it might dry, but the warp stays, right? So those are like examples of like kind of how we go through a house, right? And we're looking for those things. And then we'll test directly at those areas to see, is there a hidden problem behind the wall under the cabinet, on the top side of a ceiling that you can't see, because that's where it will actually grow, because the airflow back there is way more contained and it's not as diluted. So you're going to get humidity that stays back there for a longer period of time. You're going to get moisture that stays back there for a longer period of time. So it always grows on not always, the majority of the time will grow on the backside of stuff, right? So you use the visible water damage clues as a way to say, hey, is there something behind here? And then we would test there. But the long roundabout answer to your question, what do you do if I have some of these symptoms and I don't know if I have a problem? That's why we created the dust test, right? So what you would be able to do, it's an at-home test kit. It's a couple $100, and you're able to basically just wipe up dust with a Swiffer cloth. And then it will let you know how much mold is here. How many molds are elevated? How many molds have the ability to produce toxins? If you're somebody who's run a mycotoxin test, that mold toxin test on your body specifically, because you could do it in your body, then you can upload those lab results effectively into our platform. And then you can see the molds in your house that are tied directly to the toxins in your body. And you'll know for sure at that point, right? So you don't have to have that correlation. Like, it still works without it. But if you do, it's just like an extra piece of data that kind of ties the dots together for you. But that's the very easy way to just know, is there a problem? How bad is it? And does it warrant now a conversation about, hey, what do we do here? And what's the approach?
Yeah. So if you're somebody listening and you're like, hey, like, I don't even know where I would start. I've got people that have been living in my house that, have been hit with some of these same symptoms that you're talking about: brain fog, chronic fatigue, being sick all the time, you name it, whatever that thing kind of becomes. You're like, hey, maybe starting with this dust test is a great way to identify one, if you have a problem that you would even need. And now let's say, hey, of these, let's say you get 100 dust tests sent to your guys' lab. How many of those typically end up coming back with like, hey, this is a toxic level of mold that is now going to affect your health in some negative way? And then another thing too, like, I feel like we haven't talked about as well, is like, it kind of sounds like World War III of mold, right? So like, is there like acceptable levels too, where it's like, hey, this is but this is not something that's going to end up being too much of an exposure based on what kind of exists, and maybe it helps put people at ease a little bit of this is something that they're going to be like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do anymore.
No, it's usually these conversations, they get to the point where it's like, okay, every breath I take, I'm slowly dying. And then we have to like kind of talk about, okay, now that we set the stage, let's talk about how real people deal with this. So to answer your first question, I guess both questions are kind of related, but ultimately, like, there's mold everywhere. We're not coming into a situation expecting zero, right? Zero is an unrealistic expectation.
Even in new builds, right? Even in like brand new homes that are getting thrown up, and we'll kind of tie it into the permanent change of duty station kind of discussion for the military people here in a little bit. But yeah, I just want to make sure that we kind of talked about that too, because you figure if it rains when they're building a home, like the wood's getting wet, that's getting in there or whatever. So there's got to be some amount of like,
yeah, absolutely.
in that build process.
I mean, even if it doesn't rain while they're building it, the wood that they're using to build isn't stored properly. It gets rained on somewhere, there's mold on it. And remember, it doesn't have to be wet. It just has to be there, right? So then your house gets built with wood that has mold on it, right? And there's varying degrees of that. Some houses aren't that bad. Some houses are like really bad, right? It's just, you don't know unless you're there, like looking at them, able to see the build. I always feel like the bigger question around this is not so much like how much mold is okay, but it's about different people can handle different amounts of exposure, right? So it's more so like, is this home a place that my body can be, that I can be in, or whoever's symptomatic in the house, like, is it good enough for them, right? And there's different levels of what that means for someone. And really, that's where like a doctor has to kind of be in play here as well, to like be able to look at the dust test, be able to understand what's in there, to be able to understand what's in your body. Be like, hey, you are in a very toxic situation in your body, or you're not that bad. And so there's some exposure that you can handle, and let's work on building up your resiliency, or whatever that means. And it can be different for different people. The majority of our tests show that there's problems, because there's problems in pretty much every house, but there's ranges of it, right? So we have a high level system. It's a 1 to 5 kind of scale. And anything it's like a 1 or a 2, like, yeah, there's some stuff going on, but it's probably not the level that you're going to be, you know, running away from your house from, right? And then as you get into like 3s, 4s, and 5s, 5s are the most severe, 3s and 4s are your most common, right? And so then if you're in there, it's just a sort of like, if I'm a 3 or a 4, what does that mean for me specifically? Like, should my body be in a space that's a 1 because I'm so sensitive? Or can my body be in a space that's a 3 and I'm at 3 or 4 or whatever? Like, that's not that bad for me, right? And you gotta, that's kind of how it has to work. We, every dust test comes with a call with my team, a consulting call in the back, because we just know that it's like a lot to try to figure out. So I have the We Inspect team like tied into the dust test, so we can make sure that like our consultants who do this every day are able to help talk through this stuff with people, because it can be confusing.
I feel like as somebody who's listening to this, I'm like curious, how many times do you guys get a dust test back and you're like, just fucking burn that place and never ever go back there? Because it's had to happen at least a handful of times in your field where you're like, oh yeah, dude, like you have no chance living in this home, sell and move and find somewhere else to live. Like, how often are you giving that advice? Because I feel like that's a tough
So
pill
I would
to deliver,
say, so that's like your code 5s in our scale. Our code 5s are not very often that they come up there. And even if you do come up there, there's a bigger conversation around that. Because a lot of times when people are living in a space, they really like their neighborhood, their kids are in schools, they have some sort of limitation, doesn't really let them go somewhere else. So then the conversation is like, well, if you left here, where would you go? It's always so easy to say, leave here, go somewhere else. But then when you start kind of unpeeling, you'd be like, where would you go? It's like, well, we need to be around this space, wherever it is. And it's like, okay, so you'd be kind of looking at a similar place. And if it's here, it's probably similar in the places that were built around the same time as yours, or places that are in the same area as yours, right? So you could go somewhere else, but you're going to find problems in the next place that you go into. And that's true of any place. Like you're going to find problems any place that you go to. If I was like moving somewhere and I was able to find a spot, like if I was going to buy a house and I was able to find a spot that had like less than 5 problems in it, I'd be stoked about that. And I'd be like, cool, I could come in, fix a couple things, ready to go. Right. There's usually more than that going on in a home. And so if I was able to find that, I would be happy. But it's more about like, how can someone connect, or like, how can someone coexist in the home that they're in, and how does it function with their body? And I know, like, we're talking about the military stuff side of it earlier. And, I remember early on, a few different military houses that I went into and did, and they were in bad shape, like really bad shape. And the people are sick. And it was more so often that the family was really sick because, the person who was out and deployed, they're not in the house all the time, right? So
that's right, dude. Healthy as a clam, baby. They're ready to rock.
So all of a sudden, it's the kids or it's the wife or whatever that's like having challenges. And it becomes even harder for them because, they're kind of having to navigate more of it on their own, maybe, for whatever reason. And it, it was really hard. And, I've been in multiple of those situations, and I've seen that a lot of the homes, they just weren't really well kept. Right. And it was like very low standard. So, when did we do this? About, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, maybe around the time that we started the dust test, we also founded a nonprofit called the Change the Air Foundation, and had been working to like on the laws and like that side of the fence to try to like change just how things are done, right? Because like we could go find all the problems, but if there's no changes that are happening top down and like standards and how things are looked at, then like it's just never going to end, right? And so last year in October, we did this safe military housing survey. We were like a part of this. And it was one of the most comprehensive independent assessments of living conditions in U.S. military bases. There was 3,400 service members across 30 states and like their homes and families and stuff in those places. And we took data from the dust test. What's really great about the dust test is that it has what's called an IRB certification, which is effectively like a federal certification saying that our data is like clean and able to be used in clinical trials. So the way that we collect our data and the way that it's like monitored is really on point. So we're able to basically use this data to then be the foundation of the Mold Act. I think it's called the Mold Act, which got passed in January this year. And so the Mold Act, there's kind of like 5 key parts to it, but there's humidity standards, there's third-party inspection standards, there's a 24/7 complaint hotline, there's financial penalties against landlords for noncompliance, and there's like a dedicated Pentagon oversight office. And so this was a big thing that we put a lot of time into. I say we, I was a founding member of the foundation. We've now brought other people in to run it. But that was a really, really big win for Change the Air. And it's something that we've seen and we feel really, again, this is our family business. Like our family has been doing this. And so we felt really passionate about this. And that's why we started it in the first place and got some people on the team that are really good at what they do and really passionate about what they do. And they've been driving the ship over there and making some real change. It's been really, really cool.
I'm curious, because I've utilized the VA home loan thing in the past where there's like rules to using that and accepting that as payment form for the seller as well as the buyer. It's got to pass an appraisal and then it's got to be free pest inspection as well, which I think is kind of like a unique thing for utilizing that loan when you're buying a place in particular. Do you foresee, and this is maybe not something that or based on what the foundation has done, but do you foresee any sort of like mold standard kind of being integrated into that because of the research that you guys have done, or more of a curiosity for myself from something that I've experienced from moving around a lot of times?
I mean, I'm really hopeful that it gets there. Like one step on the way there is now, for the first time, the DoD is legally required to use. There's a mold standard called the IICRC S520. It's a standard for how you remediate homes and buildings. And they're now required that any remediation has to follow that standard, which means like beforehand, they could have just had contractor Joe from down the street come rip something out without like doing it properly. And a lot of times could cause more problems. And so that's like one standard that's now kind of in place that has to occur now as part of this. And so that's obviously after a mold problem occurs. But like when you see something like that get into play, it then is hopeful that like things can start getting placed in sooner in the process as well. So, I mean, you get something like this that happens, you get all of the data and the information that is the medical side has been uncovering over the last decade. We're going to be presenting the first layer of findings from our IRB study in December at a very large medical conference. It's called A4M, and there's like 8,000 people at this thing. It's huge. And so this is going to be the first time, because our data is the first data that is connecting house to home, or connecting, house to body. Like it's never existed before. So it's a lot of groundbreaking research that I think is going to be really, really helpful to continue to push things forward.
Super cool. Now, I know we're short on time, so I just want to ask you, like, let's say dust test comes back, things are bad, or, maybe it's in that 3-4 range. What do you guys do then? What does your inspection team do? Are you guys hopping on planes and flying out from where you're at to come in and actually look at homes and then do like maybe that's throughout the ventilation or some sort of mitigation yourself? Do you have like vendors that you recommend? Like what would the next step look like? And then we'll let you kind of tell people about where to find you guys and stuff like that so we can get you out of here.
Yeah. So the next step would be find out where the problem is, right? So if the dust test is telling you if I have a problem, the next step is where's the problem coming from, right? That's the next step. And so it is inspection at that point, if it makes sense for somebody to go through that process. So the way that we inspect works is my team is set up in kind of like regional hubs across the country. So I got my guys my guys and gals dispersed throughout the country. And so we go everywhere. We jump on flights, we drive, we do whatever we need to do. We cover the entire US. We even get flown across the world to like Europe and all these places to do this over there. So that's how the process works. Our role in the process is not fixing any of the problems. And this is really important. Our role in the process is to diagnose. Think of it as if you have kind of like your you have like your superstar doctor, but they're not the surgeon, right? They're the brain that like is able to see things nobody's able to see and put all the pieces together. And you're on Grey's Anatomy and there's Meredith Grey
Dr.
figuring
House,
out what's
dude.
wrong with you. Yeah. And then you got your surgeon, right? And the surgeons are great at what they do, but they need to know what they're doing before they get in there, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what a remediator does. So the remediator comes in and they'll do, removal of a wall if it needs to get done or whatever needs to happen, right? But they'll be using the plan that we put together that allows them to understand like where and how to do that. And when we go through a house, like I said earlier, we find problems, right? Most homes have problems and there's a number of them. It's not about fixing every single problem. It's about prioritizing the issues that are going to have the most impact on the people in the home.
For sure.
Our process is about going through, finding everything that we can, and then understanding how the people in the home live in the home, like where they spend the most time, understanding the airflow pathways through the home, how things are distributed. And generally saying, let's say, for example, if we found 15 or 20 things in the house, we'll generally come with a plan that prioritizes things down. We go from like A through E is how we tier them. And you might have like 20% of those are A's, let's say. And so it's like, hey, if you got 20 problems here, let's just say, then maybe 5 of those fall into A. So if you run at these 5, you're effectively going to be kind of playing the 80-20 concept on it.
Biggest bang for your buck. First, big rocks, little rocks. Yeah. For sure.
So most of our clients don't remediate everything we find. It's by design. But what they do remediate has a significant impact on their end goal. Like nobody's goal when they start this is, I want to go have a mold inspection. I want to remediate. No one in the history of the world has ever said that. But what they do is they wake up and they're like, I want to feel better. My kid is doing this. Like there's a health outcome they're looking for. And so that's the goal. So what we do is we strive to optimize to that goal without somebody having to rip their entire house apart. And it works. And it's worked for a very long time.
Sweet, man. I know that we got to kind of let you go and get out of here, but just tell the people like, hey, if they're interested in 1, finding the dust test, 2, potentially reaching out to you guys, where do they find you? Whether that's social media or website or kind of whatever. And then I'll put it all in the show notes as well.
Yeah, for sure. Well, the dust test is, it's easy. It's thedusttest.com. Super easy. That's the easiest part. So I'd say this, if you have symptoms or somebody in your place has symptoms and it's just like, this sort of just started happening and we don't know why, do this, right? Because this might be the, I don't know why. If you've been like seeing doctors to fix problems and no one's been able to figure it out, do this, because a lot of times this is the reason they can't figure it out. They're not looking for it, right? So, if you fall in any of those boats, like just do it and just see if it's there, because it could save you a lot of time in your health journey if you know what the actual core of the problem is. Our inspection company that I've been mentioning is called We Inspect. So you can find us at yesweinspect.com. We do health consults, home health consults with people every single day with our team on like what's going on. This is what it would look like in your house if we went through here. Here's how the process works, all that stuff. So we got that. And then if you're just looking for like information and helpful stuff, on Instagram, on Facebook, we're Mold Finders. It's at Mold Finders on both of those. And then I have a podcast called Mold Finders Radio. It's like 200 plus episodes on there, conversations with doctors, plus just me talking about homes and how things work and how to handle situations and all that stuff. So there's a lot of that on there. So if hopefully if somebody's listening to this and they're like, oh man, this has been going on and there's a light bulb that's going off, start with the dust test. It's the cheapest, easiest way to get in. There's no reason to run to an inspection if you don't need it yet, right? Start there, figure it out, and then you'll jump on the phone with my team regardless of either path that you go. And then we'll help talk through what's next.
Sweet, man. No, I really appreciate it. I feel like this is awesome stuff, and we probably could have went down 17 rabbit holes like rapid fire. So thanks for coming on. I know I got to let you go, but we'll be in touch. Maybe the next time I'm going to buy a home, I'll be FaceTiming you in the house and be like, hey, dude, how about you check this thing out for us to make sure that we're in a good spot here.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
For sure, man. All right, you guys, just remember, you don't stop playing because you get old. You get old because you stop playing. We'll see you guys next time. Peace.